Let me add my welcome to those already. My name's Stephen Baxter and I'm the senior pastor here at Hobart Baptist Church for another 2 months. For those of you aware that now coming close to the time when after 14 years it's time for me to hang up my boots and give the job to someone else. This morning we're talking about Luminous and celebrating Luminous, and for those who are visitors amongst you, let me explain what Luminous is. It's a festival that we run at Hobart Baptist Church in the middle of winter. Luminous being a bit of a play on darkness of winter, and luminous meaning light in the middle of winter. It was a series of 8 events, plus 3 art installations. The events involved conversations, a concert with an Indigenous singer, Scott Darlow, and also Christmas in winter and our carols in the middle of winter. A bit different, singing carols in the middle of winter in Australia. In the northern hemisphere, they sing carols in the middle of the winter every year. And so we've sort of brought Christmas into the middle of the year to celebrate light coming into a dark place. So 3 of us are going to talk about Luminous and celebrating Luminous. And my job is to just a bit of an opening, a bit of a framing. What is the context in which we do our Luminous Festival? Well, there's 2 things I want to focus on. Firstly, the changing demographic in Tasmania. I recently wrote in Recharge, that's the Tasmanian Baptist weekly newsletter, email. In 1971, Tasmania was the most Christian state in Australia, with nearly 9 out of 10 people saying that they were Christian. Fast forward 50 years and to 2021, and that number has plummeted to just over 1 in 3. Over the same period of time, those claiming to have no religion in Tasmania went from 1 in 20 to 1 in 2. In anyone's imagination, that is a major, major shift in the way in which our society and the people in our community see themselves. From 1 in 20 saying they had no religion to 1 in 2 saying they had no religion in 50 years. That is a massive change. I go on to say, this seismic shift didn't happen overnight. It was a culmination of a series of small cultural shifts, day by day, year by year. This shift caught the church largely unaware, and over the years, that is a church, has become separated from the mainstream of Tasmanian life. I don't think that's an overstatement. It's been a massive, massive change. And I believe in years to come, in centuries to come, historians will look back at this period of life in the history of the Western world, but particularly, let's say, of Tasmania, and say something really significant and dramatic took place during that time. And we, most of us in that room, have lived through it. Some of us have entered into it in the middle of it, depending on your age. But it's been a massive change. So Luminous is partly a response to that massive seismic shift in the demographics of the Tasmanian community. As I've said many times here, we now live in Tasmania in the most non-religious state in Australia, in the most non-religious capital city in Australia. Luminous was a response to the Midwinter Festival Dark Mofo. When it first came out in 2013, we didn't know whether we could even use those words because of what they meant. We've got a bit used to them. It was launched as a marketing exercise to build Mona, Museum of Old and New Art, visitation during winter. It was a marketing exercise. And it celebrated the darkness of the southern winter solstice at that time, featuring musical acts, large-scale light installations and a winter feast. The first year featured a 15-kilometre high light installation beam that's now permanent out at Mona, and also what is now the annual nude solstice swim. It courted controversy as a marketing strategy, particularly at the church. Who will ever forget the 20-metre high inverted red crosses erected along the waterfront? Well, maybe they will get forgotten in history, but at the time they caused a massive stir. That was back in 2018. But not all of Dark Mofo was in that area of negativity, you might say, because back in 2021 they held a performance of the orchestral lament, Jesus' Blood Never Failed Me, and a series of Gregorian chants. Initially, the church had no idea what to do with a pagan midwinter festival in our state. Over time, as a church, certainly in my perspective, we wanted to see Dark Mofo not as a threat, but as an opportunity, a chance for us to dialogue, to talk about the place of spirituality and religion in Tasmania and the future, and where does the church fit in. What Rebecca read for us from Psalm 139 helps us to remember that we have no need to fear darkness. In that psalm of David, David proclaims God is present everywhere. No matter where David goes, to the heavens, to the grave, to the further seas, or in the darkness, God is always there surrounding him, whether in the physical or the spiritual realm. And verse 12 says, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The light will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. Our initial response to Dark Mofo was fear, because it seemed dark and because even the words, what it is. And yet, time and time again throughout the scriptures, it calls us to fear not. To fear not. And not to fear is a choice. The fact that God commands us not to fear says it's actually a choice that you make to choosing not to fear because God is already there. And not only do we not fear the light, we celebrate the light in the middle of darkness. John 1 that we read, that Rebecca read, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world, talking about Jesus being the true light. And by definition, if the true light comes, then it must come into darkness. Who likes looking up at the stars? Anyone? Where's the best place to see the stars? In the dark. Can you see it in the light? And they call it light pollution. You've heard that term, light pollution? That is being in the middle of the city where lights are on 24/7 and you can't see the stars. So, rather than seeing Dark Mofo as a thing to fear, why not see it as a dark place where Jesus can shine even brighter? Rather than withdrawing and hiding, if Jesus truly is, and if we really believe Jesus is the light of the world, that he shines brighter in the darkness, then what an opportunity. Let's embrace this as an opportunity rather than run away from it. And so therefore Luminous was a thing for us to learn how do we, in our day and age, be light in the middle of our dark winter. You know, the radical shift that took place in our community took the church by surprise, as I said, and we're still playing catch up. I don't believe the trend of people saying that they've got no religion is about to change anytime soon, although there will be a time where we'll see it turn around. I dare say that's true. But in the meantime, our task is to learn to live in this moment, to be the light of Christ in this moment. God is never caught out by darkness. God engages with darkness. Jesus comes into darkness. In fact, Jesus does his best work in darkness because that's where the light shines. Healing comes to those who are sick. Resurrection comes to those who are dead. The light comes to those who are in the dark. It's moments like these, this seismic shift that we've seen in our community here, that calls for pioneers to fix their eyes on Jesus, who is the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, as Hebrews says, and learn to do life as children of light in dark places. And we see it through the scriptures. People like Paul was a pioneer in that. Then we see it in church history, like Martin Luther or Wesley's or Francis of Assisi's or Huss or Tyndale or the Waldensians and the Cathars. We can go through time and time again through history of the people who had the courage to trust and to celebrate the light of Jesus coming into the world in a dark place. And that's why Luminous is our attempt to have a go at that. I'm not saying we've got it perfect. We're still learning how to do it. But Luminous is seeing this as an amazing opportunity to talk about the light of Christ in a moment where most people are fearing the dark. And now I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
I've got a question's coming.
Oh, right, okay.
No, you don't get off the hook that easily, because I want you to answer this question rather than me having to answer it later. This question's come in and I think it's a good one. How can we be a light to a church? I'm assuming, I think they mean a broader church, but how can we be light to a broader church that seems to be dying?
Oh, I think I tried to answer that. One is not fearing. Okay, the first thing is not to fear, and I think we can easily fear. The second thing is to be confident and to be convinced that Jesus is the light of the world, that Jesus does shine in dark places. And the third one is to be innovative and have a go at working at what that means. And I think Jesus is very clear whether you begin with that, you begin with loving your enemies. You begin in a place where you don't withdraw, but you engage. And you do it with love and grace, because that's what Jesus did.
It's really, I find it really interesting that you started with the do not fear. I can remember a Tas Baptist event, it was years ago now, where I don't even remember what the church was that was being discussed, but it was a church that was dying. And you made some comments that really, I didn't even know who you were at the time. It really struck me because you made this comment that it felt really out there, but I couldn't argue with it. And that was something along the lines of, well, look, if that church is going to die, maybe that's God's plan. Death and resurrection is part of God's work. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think we can really take trust in that. No, the church is not a club that we need to sustain. The church is the body of Christ, and it's his job to sustain us. Our job is to remain close to Jesus and allow God to do his work. And we know through the Old Testament and through church history, there are times where God's people do it well and they're growing, when they're going back, where they're getting into exile. There's a whole lot of things, but always God's got it in hand. So we're in the middle of a massive change. We don't need to fear it. We don't need to worry about it. We just need to say, God, what are you doing at this moment? And help us to keep in step with you, what you're doing at this moment.
I've just had, the phone's literally just buzzed with another question. Why were or are conservative evangelicals so afraid of dark mofo?
Well, I don't know whether it's just conservative evangelicals. So let's say, why do we, as people of light, fear darkness? Just generally, let's not categorise people. I think that's why Jesus needs to come, to give us hope, because it feels overwhelming and overbearing. It does. That's the normal thing of when things come at us that either we don't understand, that are taking us away from what we feel comfortable about, that's taking us into areas we're not sure of. Of course, the thing is to fear, and it's built in us. And so that's the first reaction. And the second reaction is, I think, oh, God's got it anyhow. So I don't think we can stop ourselves from fearing. But the Bible says stop doing it. I think I will fear. Fear is a good thing. I fear a big fire.
Well, if we never felt fear, we would never need courage.
Yeah, but also we would do stupid things.
We would, absolutely.
So fear is a good thing in the right area. So is dark mofo and the things that it represents, are there things in that we need to, in the right sense, stand against? Absolutely. There are a lot of things that we need to cheer on as well. and we need the wisdom of God to know the difference between the two.
Thank you, Stephen. Michael.
Good morning, everyone. Can I have the photo that I have there of my notebook? A couple of notebooks. There you go. I come to you this morning to talk about some of the art projects that were part of Dark Mofo, or part of Luminous, one of those things. And look, as a general comment about Luminous this year, one of the things that I had the privilege of doing was to be here just a little bit early for most activities and speaking with, say, just having a conversation with the speakers of each of the nights before the night and just hearing their enthusiasm for the topic that they were talking about, like their genuine love for people and Tasmania and change and wanting to see things actually actioned in our state. It was infectious. It was across all of the speakers too. They didn't just speak about the topic. You could hear the passion that was underneath their language. And if you didn't have the chance to be there for some of them, I wasn't there for the young leader one, and that was sad that I missed that. But that enthusiasm of some of our key leaders in the state that Stephen had managed and Matt had managed to have as conversation panelists, it was infectious to be a part of. And the same was true for the artists that were joined in this year. So there were 3 this year, myself included. I would say that it took a lot of my time this year to not help the other creatives, but just to keep them on the theme of what we were doing and to keep them going in their pursuits and help them manage what they were doing. It took more time than I was expecting to do. But the resulting works that they created were just beautiful. If you didn't have a chance to come and see them, we'll come back to that one. I'm going around my point, aren't I? But can we go to the clay, the cracked clay? So this is Karen McCormack's work, and it was much bigger than this, and it went through the foyer out there, lots of little pinch pots and other things that she created. She wanted to give the feel of the beach without replicating the beach. She wasn't trying to make a beach in our foyer, thank goodness. She was just trying to give the feel of it. She did it so beautifully. There was a person, I'll just give you one story. There was a person that came, and they were talking about their reaction to the environment and some of their sadness with the discussion that's happening around the environment, and that it can feel a little bit doom and gloom when people talk about it. And she was also reflecting that she herself, because she focuses so much on activism within the environment area, that she felt doom and gloom and lost often with what she did. But as she stood there and contemplated what Karen had made, she described how hopeful Karen's work was, while at the same time describing some of the challenges that exist. And the demeanor change in this lady, just from standing there, I don't know, I shouldn't say just, should I, about creative work, because of the power of standing there and just contemplating that work, her demeanor changed so powerfully to do with hope. You could just hear it in her language, especially as she left. The other one other than mine was Joel, who created a musical piece, particularly focused on home, one of the themes of Luminous this year. And there was a guy that was there on opening night that heard the piece, and he was talking to myself and Joel about how that he had created in his home a retreat, sort of a fear, a place to get away from the fear of the world. And he was talking about how listening to Joel's piece was changing his attitude to just home, and that it's not a place to retreat from, but a place to go to for peace, a place to intentionally create peace there for him to be encouraged and built up. This is just some of the ways that these pieces have impacted other people. Can I have my notebooks back again? So my piece was created to focus in particular on, this is not my piece, but this is indicative, this is illustrative of what I'm talking about. My pieces were created on the theme of kith, if you know that word. So many of us are familiar with the word kin, therefore kinship, being similar, intimate, in relationship with other people who are like us. I wanted to focus on kith, which is a word to describe being intimate with the landscape that is around us. And in particular, that intimacy extends to the health of the landscape, that you're so intimate with it that you know the rocks and the animals and the rivers and the streams and the trees, and you can notice when they're not healthy, and you can notice when some of them are missing, and you can notice when they change. One of the ladies that came to see my piece, it started with her talking about her fascination with the word kith, as I had written it on the description. And then we talked a little bit about eagles, which was in the piece itself. And I was describing to her that eagles for me are a sign that God is present and active with me in the landscape. So then we had a conversation to do with joining the two, between the intimacy of us in the landscape, and now the intimacy of us in the landscape while also being intimate with God. And at the end of that conversation, that went for a while, in the freezing cold, I have to say, out the front of the church, not in front of my piece, she committed her life to Christ. Now that is a big thing for someone to do in the space of a 10-minute conversation, yes? There were other people that I prayed for. There were other people that I had long faith conversations with. But this is the power of what can be done in Luminous. It isn't just a cute festival. And we're not putting it on just to have conversations and show art. The result of these things, the result of Luminous, is sometimes noticed in that person coming to faith. But I think the impact is much bigger than that in terms of the faith conversations that are generated through all of the things that we did during those 2 weeks. And we may never know the impact that we have, but if we're ever to turn around those gloomy statistics that, I can't say the word statistics, but those gloomy numbers that Stephen mentioned, well, then it's through these activities where we are connected with our community and we go on a journey with them to help them to see that our God is not theory. He's not a God of the past. We don't just remember him when we come here on a Sunday, do we? We know and believe and walk with a present and active God. And my piece and the other artists that were part of it helped people in our community to see that. That's a powerful thing. I'll stop there. I can sit down?
You can sit down, but I'm going to
Nice.
give you the phone.
Cool.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Now, my notes have crashed twice while I've been sitting there, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. When I first came to Hobart Baptist Church in early 2022, which feels like both 5 minutes ago and years and years ago, I'll be honest, I'd never actually even heard of you, Luminous. I didn't even know what it was. And so when Stephen first explained to me what Luminous was and what the thinking was behind it, about the idea, for example, of positively interacting with dark mofo, I was really excited because I'd been watching lots of different churches and Christian leaders sort of, I kind of felt like missed the mark in their response to dark mofo, and I don't even blame them for it because, as Stephen said, nobody knew how to react to it, right? But a lot of the public discourse from churches in Tasmania and particularly in Hobart, was negative. And it was combative. I mean, particularly, I was thinking about the upside down crosses and how angry and upset people were. And I can remember also thinking to myself, but doesn't the Bible say Peter was crucified on an upside down cross? I'm not sure I should be offended about it. Maybe it's just a discussion starter. Anyway, I was really excited about the idea of an interaction with the city during the time of Dark Mofo. It is interesting, like, before I came here, I'd just finished Bible college. I wasn't necessarily looking to leave where I was. I felt led to lead in a church, but at the time I felt led to lead in the church where I was at. And so there was a part of me that was a little sceptical about leaving the safety that we had at Lenna Valley. One of the things, though, that really hit me when I looked at Hobart Baptist Church's values was there was just this little thing in the value statement. It's funny how little things that often can make a big difference. And it was this. It's just a little sentence. We value our city. We value our city. I read that and I thought, I want to go there. That's where I want to be. I want to be working in a church that values this city. And now you're stuck with me, right? In fact, I'd say that you can't, well, maybe you can, but I'd say it's really hard to value the city if you're not involved with the city and if you're not interacting with the culture of the city. So Luminous appealed to me because of that. It was a way for us to interact in a cultural moment that was happening in the place where we are and actually show the city that, hey, we want to participate too. We want to be part of this. So that's exciting to me. Something interesting is that a large percentage of people who attend Luminous discussions, at least in the 3 years that I've been here, are not members of our church family. I don't know if you knew that or not, but if you come to the conversations, you'll often look around and think, there's only about 10 people from Hobart here. Who are all these other people? All right? I mean, I often wish there were more people, but it's actually really exciting that, say, you might get 45 people show up and 35 of them are people who you've never seen before, and they've come into a church building. I'm energised by that. I'm excited by that. They come into our space and they get to see and hear stuff they might not expect to interact with in a church building. They can be surprised. There's something really powerful in surprising people's expectations of what they think you are. And hopefully they have a positive experience. The conversations are always really different, just like the art installations, right? And everything won't appeal to everybody. I mean, even me, right? Even me, sometimes there are things that we sort of do and I'm like, don't know that one was for me. But it's important to reach different audiences with different things. But then you have the ones that just are really powerful. I can remember in my first year here that it was the conversation about brave leadership, where we got, I think we had 4 women from different areas of leadership. It was a really interesting conversation that they had about leading. And then last year, we had a conversation with 3 migrants or refugees about belonging in Tasmania. And that one was amazing. It was one of the highlights of the year for me, sitting there listening to this conversation. It was great. And then for me, this year, it was so exciting for me to get to host a conversation between 3 really impressive young Tasmanian leaders from our 3 political parties, our 3 main political parties here. And that night was so energizing for me. Like, I came away from that thinking, wow, even if I hadn't interacted with anything else to do with Luminous, this conversation was so great. They were so inspiring. They were so exciting. It was a great, great conversation. Putting on an event like Luminous takes a lot of organising, and it takes a lot of work. And let's be honest, a ton of resources go into Luminous, and a ton of energy. Every year, about this time, I think I get sick. Maybe there's a correlation, I don't know. I'm always glad it's over because it was hard work, but I'm always glad that we did it because it's powerful, it's meaningful. It's interesting, having talked to a lot of people in our church family, I feel like I can say this and be pretty close to the mark. A lot of people see Luminous as Stephen's thing. They see it as Stephen's baby, the thing Stephen does. Right? And that's not wrong, right? Because obviously Stephen has been the driving force behind Luminous every year. And now, Stephen's stepping away. And that time is coming fast. We think that it's a long way away. Every now and then, like, I fool myself into thinking that it's a long way away, but it's a couple of months away. And we're going to have to decide, as a church family, what are we going to do with Luminous moving forward? Maybe it's better to say, rather than we have to decide, we get to decide. That's exciting, right? We get to decide what to do with Luminous. Because it's an opportunity. It's not a burden, it's an opportunity. It's exciting. Over the second half of this year, a lot of what we do here at Hobart Baptist Church is going to go through a bit of a review process. I think that's just normal. And Luminous is definitely going to be one of the things that we're going to be reviewing. We actually review Luminous every year. People might not realise that, but we do. We go through a review process every year with it. But this year, we're going to particularly be zeroing in, dialing down, and looking at Luminous. We're going to look at what has worked well, what's not worked well, what do people like, what has been successful, what has been a struggle. And as a church family, we'll get to work out what are we going to do with Luminous next year. And not just next year, but what are we going to do with Luminous in the future? Because the future is coming. What do we want to do? What do we want Luminous to be? And who feels led to be a part of it moving forward? And so this is my question to us. What do we want to do with it? So I would invite people to be thinking about that. And if you've got things to share, feed it into the review process. We need to hear from you. I see Michael looking at me and the phone's lit up. No, he's shaking his head. I didn't really want to answer questions anyway. This is your last chance today, really, to text in a question. I'm finished. I wrapped up already. No? Good. I'm going to pray. Our dear Lord in heaven, you are such a good God. And we want to thank you for the blessing of creativity that you have given to many people who have been able to come and contribute here with the Luminous Festival and with other things. We want to thank you for the courage that it took to decide to do something like Luminous, and for the energy and drive that it takes to make it happen every year. I want to thank you for Stephen and Michael, who have driven this largely for 4 years now. And we want to thank you for the opportunity that we have now as a church family to take Luminous into whatever comes next. And again, I say it a lot. People may get sick of hearing it, but I'm going to keep saying it. This is your church. You are the person who gets to decide what happens here, ultimately, Lord. It's your church. You can have whatever you want here. So show us what you want us to do with Luminous. And give us the obedient hearts and the courage to follow your ways. And pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.